Out of the ash I rise with my red hair, and I eat men like air. What a brilliant concluding stanza! The somber mood of the poem suddenly evaporates and is replaced by a mood of exuberance. The poet feels that enough has been said about death like experiences, about the tragedy of death, about the trauma of death, about the misery of death. Now she is going to speak of what happens when she emerges from death or from the death like experience. I have already said that Sylvia Plath saw the speaker in the poem as the phoenix. The speaker feels that she will come out of the death like experience with redoubled energy, with renewed vigor. She is the phoenix, and she will come out of the ash. She will rise out of the ash with her red hair, and she will eat men like air. In real life, Sylvia Plath was very proud of her red hair, and the exhibit in the Sylvia Plath exhibition that was held at the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C. in 2018, which attracted the maximum attention, or at least one of the exhibits which attracted the maximum attention, was a long chestnut brown ponytail which had belonged to Sylvia Plath and which had been cut off by her mother when Sylvia Plath was a teenager. The point that the speaker wants to make is that death or near death cannot defeat her. She will emerge from death stronger than ever. And she has her red hair, her extremely attractive red hair, which is capable of casting a spell on men. She will eat men like air. She will emerge from the death experience or the near death experience as a man eater, as a woman of devastating attraction to men, and she will eat men like air. Eating air is something very easy. She will eat men without any effort, effortlessly. She will eat men very easily. She will emerge from her death experience or death like experience as an extremely attractive woman who is capable of casting a spell on men, and she will become a man eater, and she will eat men effortlessly. What are the important thematic concerns of Lady Lazarus? Lady Lazarus is a complex poem which deals with a number of differing themes, and an effort can be made here to identify the most important themes handled by the poem. The first of these is, of course, death. Not just death, perhaps, but death inflicted by oneself, death caused by oneself, suicide. Death is a solution to the unbearable problems of life. At the same time, the speaker feels that attempting suicide repeatedly is absurd. The second most important theme of the poem is rebirth. It may seem odd at first sight that a poem should deal with death and also with rebirth. For Sylvia Plath, death is an opportunity for rebirth. An end is always a fresh beginning. A death is always a rebirth. The poem sees death not just as a solution to the problems of life, but also as an opportunity for regeneration. The speaker undergoes death, or at least undergoes a near death experience, and emerges from it as a stronger, more vibrant, more attractive person. The third most important theme dealt with by Lady Lazarus is suffering. If you read the poem carefully, you realize that the poem is written by someone who has suffered too intensely and for too long. It is really unfair that a person like the speaker in the poem is subjected to suffering, constant suffering, unbearable suffering, intense suffering for such an unreasonably long time. The poem deals with suffering at the individual level and also at the collective level, as exemplified by the suffering of the Jews in the concentration camps of Hitler's Germany. In a very subtle, in a very nuanced manner, Lady Lazarus discusses a woman's place in a man's world. And if you examine the poem carefully, you will realize that there is throughout the length of the text an undercurrent of unspeakable rage against patriarchy. The poet brings in bits of European history, especially German history, and we are repeatedly reminded of the shocking horrors of Hitler's Germany, of the victimization of the Jews by the Nazis. It may seem odd, it may seem strange that a poem which deals mainly with death should also deal with life and the value of life. Yes, at certain points in the poem, the poet displays an intense awareness of the value of life, of the significance of life, of the use of life, and this life comes to an end with death. The poem treats the relationship between doctors and patients. The doctor in the poem is the savior of the speaker. He brings the girl back to life from death or almost death. At the same time, he is the enemy of the speaker because the speaker was fascinated by death and wanted to unite with death. And the doctor has shattered the relationship, the special relationship between the speaker in the poem and death. The poem certainly throws light on Sylvia Plath's ideas on God. God is certainly the savior of the world. After all, the poem is titled Lady Lazarus, and in the Holy Bible, Lazarus is the man who is brought back to life by God the Son, by Jesus. Hence, there cannot be any doubt about whether God is the Savior or not. At the same time, God is not wholly good. God is not wholly God. The poet says, her God, her Lucifer. Mr. God, Mr. Lucifer. The fact is that if God were such a good God, if God were such a good God, he would not have tolerated so much suffering in this world. When we realize what the world is like, we are forced to arrive at the conclusion that her God is her Lucifer, that Mr. God is Mr. Lucifer. Finally, the poem highlights the innate callousness of society. There is absolutely no concern for the unfortunate members of society, on the part of society as a whole. For the survivor of a suicide attempt, suicide is tragedy. Suicide is trauma. Suicide is hell. But for the world, it is nothing but a performance. It is nothing but entertainment. It is nothing but something to be watched and enjoyed. Thus, Lady Lazarus exposes the brutal callousness of society, the shocking unconcern of society, and establishes that Schadenfreude, or the joy that one feels on the suffering of others, is an important factor in the psychological makeup of the typical human being. The beauty of Lady Lazarus is that, despite the fact that it is a very complex poem, and despite the fact that it handles numerous themes, it ensures that all the themes are efficiently integrated into one another, that all the themes are skillfully dovetailed into the fabric of the poem.